when you read something like this, the conditions for a sustainable cessation in the fighting, what does that mean in your mind?
Well, I think from an Israeli point of view, this means one of two things, or that Hamas is willing to release more hostages, and for that, Israel will be willing to have a few days of ceasefire, as we did before.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the other thing it means is that there will be probably a ceasefire once we really destroy the main capabilities of Hamas as a governmental entity and as an army.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're getting closer to this point in the coming weeks.
And I just wonder what that actually means, destroying the capabilities of Hamas, because a lot of the targets that have been destroyed by the IDF, especially in aerial bombardments, are civilian infrastructure, whether it's apartment blocks or people's houses, or in some cases, churches or mosques. How is that part of the Hamas military infrastructure?
Hamas is organized as battalions and brigades. Almost all its infrastructure is in civilian sites. We have found massive military Hamas sites inside the mosques, inside hospitals, inside schools and kindergartens. This is the way this vicious organization operates. Also, we know there is a vast underground infrastructure underneath Gaza, and it's all connected to houses.
The Gaza Metro, the tunnels.
Exactly, the tunnels. And these tunnels, the exit of these tunnels is inside private houses.
Sure.
And the schools and so on. So this is the way Hamas built its infrastructure, and this is why there is a need for the IDF to reach these places and take them over and destroy all these rocket launchers and huge amounts of munitions and everything that we are finding in these sites.
Sure. And I've heard that before from many of your colleagues and indeed from the Israeli government. But of course, if Hamas is embedded in the civilian population, as they do seem to be, and I think even Hamas itself wouldn't deny much of that, and then it requires you to destroy, in order to hit them, everything that's civilian around them, you're not leaving anything left that could be rebuilt or reoccupied once you've got rid of Hamas, are you?
So I think that once we get rid of Hamas, and this is, by the way, something that will benefit dramatically also the Palestinian society that has been taken hostage by a terror organization, then I think that with massive assistance from the world, there will be the ability to rebuild. We have to remember that in the years that actually Israel was responsible in these areas, there was a huge growth economically, universities.
But you've flattened all that. You've destroyed all that. The universities, are flattened.
So I'm saying that, we're not responsible for the fact that Hamas has used all these sites as military sites and made the whole Gaza Strip one big bunker. This is, they're using this to shoot Israeli cities. We have to remember that in this war, thousands and thousands of rockets have been shot to all the cities in Israel, indiscriminately, by the way. When we operate against terror. We don't operate against civilians. We are very careful. We are doing it very precisely. While Hamas is shooting indiscriminately and butchering, burning people alive, decapitating heads of civilians, this is the difference.
Right. The thing we've had, let's not get into that argument now, because I've had it so many times about whether, your commitment to precise targeting, is actually exists, number one, or whether it even works particularly well when you consider this enormous number of civilian casualties.
We always operate according to international law, and we told society to move from places we are engaging in war so they are safer. We are doing everything we can. And we have to remember,
to be honest, to much of the world, it really doesn't look like that, and it certainly doesn't feel like that to people in the Gaza Strip. But the question I want to ask you...
We're talking about feelings. We're talking about facts. And
this is the fact. The facts are 20,000 people are dead, and most of them are civilians. So how did they all end up dead?
This is according to Hamas, right? We don't have
even the Americans... I had this argument last week with one of your government
I'm
spokesmen.
talking
I want to
about
move.
Hamas giving numbers.
Yeah. Well, no, but it's even the Americans, your best friends, are not questioning those numbers. In fact, if anything, the intelligence services in America and the administration are saying that the real numbers are probably quite a lot higher because of the numbers of people buried under the rubble. But my question is this. Does what you're doing, does what the IDF is doing in Gaza kill the idea of Hamas? Or does it actually make it stronger?
Well, I don't think you can make it stronger than it is, because Hamas has radicalized a whole society in the last 17 years. And I think really it's not
But has it done that?
yeah,
How do we know that it's radicalized that society? I mean,
well, it's very
we don't.
you know,
It's not a free society, so we don't. There aren't any opinion polls out there. They haven't had an election since 2006. The last time I went to the Gaza Strip 2 years ago, there are a lot of people who don't like them at all.
Hamas is controlling the whole education system in Gaza. It's teaching children from the year 3 to hate Jews and to be martyrs and to really admire death. This is what Hamas has been doing for 17 years. This is a radicalized society.
But does that mean, sorry to interrupt you, I mean, does that mean that because you think it's a radicalized society and even kids are brought up with this stuff and brainwashed, does that mean that they are all essentially fair game for the IDF because all of society, in your mind, has been taken over by Hamas?
So as I said, the answer is no, because we look at them as victims of Hamas, and we fight militants. We fight people who hold guns and shoot at us. We don't fight children and women.
But you are killing, your bombs are killing many thousands of children and women.
So I'm saying we said to the society, and most of them did, move to places that are safe and are not.
But then you killed then you bombed those safe places as well. You said move south, and you started bombing the south too.
So today we took an area in Gaza, which is near the sea, in the area, by the way, where our own towns were at the time. It's an open area.
Al-Muwasi.
Asked the society to move to this area, which we're not operating in at all.
It's the size of Heathrow Airport. It's a waste dump. There's nothing there. And you want 2 million people to move there.
But the idea is that because it's bordering Egypt, and this is where the aid is coming from, this is the best way to get the aid as soon as possible and as closer as possible. And I think, you know, what worries me, and I talk about it a lot in the last 2 months, is that the real solution, at least while the war is going on, like in any other war, was to let all these refugees to go out to safety zone in the Sinai Peninsula on the Egyptian side. Yet, Egypt is blocking the border. This is unheard of.
Because they don't want people. Yeah, but I guess the Egyptians would say, you know, these people are from Gaza. That's their home. If they come to Egypt in temporary refugee camps, we know what happens to temporary refugee camps in this part of the world. They become permanent.
So we saw in Ukraine 40 million people go. Imagine Poland closing the border, or Germany. Nobody did that. Only the Egyptians are doing that. And nobody is saying anything. And yet everybody is talking about humanitarian needs. So I think we really should be focusing on how to give a serious solution, because it's obvious that as long as the refugees are in an area that is a war zone, it's not a safe environment. And the only solution is temporarily to move them to at least children, women, to the northern part of the Sinai Peninsula. There they can be in safety.
So I've spoken to many people in Gaza, you know, and I've asked them this question, and I said, why don't you move to Egypt, even if the Egyptians allowed you? And they say, we don't want to move because we don't think we can ever come back. And that would then amount to ethnic cleansing. And that's what the Israelis really want. They want us to move out and then never come back. The truth of the
matter is that nobody is asking the Palestinians what they want. People are deciding for them. I'm sure, I know the society, that there are hundreds of thousands of people who want to get out, but nobody is asking them.
But would you let them return?
To decide for them. Like the world thinks that they know what they want. They assume that they know what they want. And you know that even before the war, in the last decade, 300,000 Gazans left because they could not support living under a terror organization. So the motivation to get out of this hell exists. The question is, what do we do about that?
It's not that easy to leave Gaza, though, is it? I mean, even before the war, it wasn't easy to get out because Israel
For
blocked
the
many people
very
from
same
leaving,
reason I
and
said
Egypt
before,
does the same.
because the Egyptians are blocking the borders.
Yeah.
That's the only reason why.
But what guarantee would Israel give those people who have left, if they were allowed to leave and go to Egypt, what guarantee would there be they would ever be able to come back?
Why not? I mean, we don't have a problem. The only problem we have is with terror, with military infrastructure, not with citizens. We have no problem people living in Gaza. We have no aspirations to be there or something like that. It's just about not having a terror army on our borders.
Let me ask you if I may, Amir, two more questions before we have to go. We know that, the members of the Israeli government have been very open about the fact that they don't think a two-state solution is on the cards ever, even though that's what the Americans and indeed the Brits are still calling for. What do you think? Two-state solution, waste of time, not going to happen? Or is it something to be aspired to?
I think that there are many kinds of two-state solution. The kind that says that Israel needs to be a state along the shore with 9 miles of shore, or 15 kilometers if you want. This is basically saying to Israel, destroy yourselves. This is not the kind of things we can do, but we definitely would like to find a solution where the Palestinians have their own citizenship and the Israelis have their own citizenship, and we live in coexistence. The problem is that this is not going to happen, not with Hamas, not with Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and by the way, also not with the Palestinian Authority, which is also aspiring for the destruction of Israel. And we need a different kind of leadership on the Palestinian side. I myself believe that it should be based on the local leadership of the clans, of the Hamulas, and not on a terror organization like the PLO. So maybe Gaza will be some kind of test case to what kind of solutions we can really build in the long term.
Right. But the thing is, the war against Hamas, the war against Gaza is making, and indeed also crucially the activities of settlers and others in the West Bank, is making the emergence of a moderate Palestinian political force more and more difficult, isn't it?
Look, there's a lot of talk about settlers. I don't know exactly why, because there is no numbers that support all these theories. You have in Judea and Samaria 500,000 law-abiding citizens with maybe like 10, 12 people that are causing some kind of problem. And
with impunity, I mean, they're getting away with it. They're not being held to account.
Also, I would assume that in London you have crime and you have people who are not abiding to the law. The numbers in Judea and Samaria are even lower than Tel Aviv. So
this is about settlers going into villages at gunpoint and forcing people out at gunpoint. I've seen it myself just recently. This is different to the kind of violence you have in places like Jenin or Hebron. This is about just intimidation of Palestinian villagers or Bedouins going and saying, clear off.
The reality is that there is a lot of tension between Palestinians who are attacking Jews also. You know that you have like 51% support in the West Bank for Hamas. The society there under the Palestinian Authority is also very radicalized, and it's challenging. It's challenging to live near people who are radicalized, and yes, there is tension. And we have to deal with this because the education the Palestinian Authority is giving them is no much different than Hamas in Gaza. We have to acknowledge that and do something about that.
Finally, Amir, there was this tragic case a week ago of 3 Israeli hostages who managed to either escape their captors or, were left to leave, emerging from a building in Gaza. The IDF thought that they were, maybe Hamas operatives dressed up as civilians, even though they'd taken their shirts off and they were waving a white flag, and they were shot dead. What's your reaction to that, that terrible tragedy?
Yeah, so first, it's a terrible tragedy. And what we know is that the soldiers sent the dog with a camera. And then when the dog arrived, fire was opened and the dog was killed. And then
killed by whom?
Killed by terrorists that shot the dog that got near them. So the understanding of the commanders was this is an ambush. And by the way, this happened in many occasions because, as I said, the society is radicalized, and also Hamas is not with uniform. You know, they are moving as citizens, and sometimes they send people without weapons to try to get the soldiers near, and then they shoot. We saw many occasions like that in the war. The atmosphere, the whole scenario is extremely, extremely complicated. Very difficult decision making. I think it's very difficult for anybody who is not actually in danger of life and not inside the war to understand how complicated.
And of course, one of the other complications, I mean, is that we are not allowed as Western journalists to go into Gaza. I mean, we've tried and tried and tried again. And the only time we've been in this war is with IDF embeds. But that's not the same because it's for a short period of time. And, you know, it's heavily censored and you can't speak to anyone when you're there. And we would all, I mean, not all of us, but many of us would like to go in to the Gaza Strip to see with our own eyes what's going on. But sadly, the government is not permitting that.
This is something you need to work out with the...
We've tried. We have tried.
We have tried. I'm not the address for this.
Okay, I know you're not. Anyway, Amir Avivi, retired Brigadier General, former Deputy Commander of the IDF in Gaza. Thank you very much indeed.